Hello, and welcome to Quintessential Comix. I'm Alice Quinn, and we have book club today. Woo! So we wanted to do, for the month of July, or June, we decided to have a Pride as a theme, because it was Pride Month, and then our book club just got pushed. So now it's July, but we're still talking about the same books. We had a really lively, whole debate where everyone had such really good ideas. So if you thought these books were cool, or if you didn't think they were cool, but you were interested in other sort of LGBTQTA books, there's a ton of recommendations in the Facebook poll on the event page. So today we're talking about Fun Home by Alison Bechdel and Strangers in Paradise by Terry Moore. We ended up picking two. Oh, wait, hold on. Tara?
Yeah, what's up?
Oh, you were showing the book. I missed it.
Oh, hey.
Hey.
Gotta love that library system.
It's a good system. It's a good system. It employs me, so I'm pretty happy. Today, I've got Tara joining us. Sorry. Tara? Crap.
Tara.
I said it wrong one of those ways.
You had a 50-50 chance and you blew it. No, that's all right.
Tara.
Yes. No, Tara.
I'm going to get it wrong forever now. Thanks so much for joining us today, Tara. I'm doing it wrong again. Forever?
Yes, you are. You are. Let's say it together. Tara, everyone.
Tara.
My name is Tara. Yep.
Okay. We had. I'm really disappointed we didn't get any of our queer friends to join us in this discussion today. They were all busy living their lives and stuff, not talking about books, which is fine. Okay. People have families and stuff.
I'll do my best to be the most queer version of myself that there is for the discussion.
Aren't we all just like a little bit queer? Okay, I don't know if that's like racist, so I'm gonna just stop there.
Okay.
We should just retitle this episode Alice is like insensitive to everybody forever. But what do you want to talk about first? I'll give you the choice. Do you want to talk about Fun Home or Strangers in Paradise?
You know, I seeing as I just read Strangers in Paradise today, let's give that one a start.
Yeah,
start with that one.
So, did you like it?
I actually really did. It had such a, I don't know, I guess after, you know, because I read so many comics every day and often ones that are coming out new and there's so many queer voices in comics today, it was kind of refreshing to read what felt like very like kind of retro early queer voice, and the art style really has a kind of 90s vibe to it that I appreciated, while still not being like overtly sexualizing every woman. Kind of I liked the art style a lot. It was really refreshing in an old-fashioned kind of way.
Cool. I have a bunch of photos on my computer, but they're not being able to screen share right now. So we're just going to forget about that and just talk about the comics. I was like, I'm going to put up a nice screenshot, and I was like, no, it's not working right now. Google Hangouts keeps changing. Yeah, Strangers in Paradise is really good. Actually, it's one of the comics I had read in like the early days of me reading comics. This is like 10 years ago. And so I revisited it for this book club, and I honestly I forgot how much fun it was and how much happens in that first book, because it gets, I mean, like there's a lot that happens in that first book, and there's like 90 issues or something in the whole series. So it was one of those things, like sometimes, you know, you have those like rose-colored glasses on, you're like, oh, that book was so good, and you go back and revisit it, and you're like, no, I was just reading this with like teenage eyes, and I made way more of it than it was. Whereas like this one, I was like, oh yeah, I remember it being good, and then I go back and I'm like, no, it's great. So I was like,
I have to agree. Like, I found the writing was very self-aware. I liked that it started really kind of slapstick, like soap opera, rom-com-y, like, oh, Francine has this guy and she hasn't had sex with him for the whole year because she's saving herself. And then she shows up at his office and he's banging a receptionist. It's like so cliche, but then it takes a 180 very quickly. And I really kind of, that's what grabbed me. I was like, wow, that was not the direction I was expecting this book to go. And it goes that way while still retaining the individual voices of all the characters. Like, they're thrown into wacky situations, but they still feel like those people you met on the first few pages, which I really liked.
Yeah, and one of, like, I guess the pride elements we're gonna go with, I really enjoyed is the idea that sexuality is a spectrum and that it's fluid, and that, you know, like, you know, Francine, you know, sort of struggles with this a little bit in the book because her best friend's in love with her, and she's like, well, I love my best friend, but I don't know if I love her. And, you know, over the course of time, like, things happen and she starts changing her mind and starts sort of like reevaluating. And I really like that idea that, like, it's not either or, it's not all 100%. Like, there are many areas of gray, and there's going to be times where this feels right, and there's going to be times where something else feels right. So I thought that was, like, really cool.
Yeah, I would say that that point was where, like, if I had to criticize it at all, it falls short, but I'm not sure if that's the author wanting to highlight society's perspective or if that's the author's perspective on kind of bi erasure, because Katchu is, at the beginning, you know, she's kind of the lesbian, but then her love interest, gosh, what's his name? David? Yeah, is like, well, I've met lesbians and you're not like any lesbians I've ever met. You're clearly interested in me and therefore you can't be gay. And I'm like, that's kind of a line that this day and age would be labeled as bi erasure, because it's like either you're gay or you're straight. Not unlike Buffy, either Willow is straight or now that she's dating Tara, she's gay, and there's no in between. And so what I liked is that the characters did start to, particularly Francine and Katchu, they don't seem to care. They're kind of confused, but they're figuring it out, and they're willing to have affection for men and women. And Katchu especially, she's like, I don't know what I am, and that's okay, but everyone else seems to want to fit her into that box. And I'm not sure if the author is trying to fit her into that box or if he's trying to point out that that box is not necessarily a nice thing to put people into.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Not 100%.
It's really interesting, and I read the rest of the series, but I haven't read it recently. So those are themes they definitely continue to explore throughout the books. But I do agree with what you're saying, but I also think, like, I don't think that's a fault of the author. I think that's a characteristic flaw that he's giving to David. David's a dick. Yeah. Don't like David. I know, like, spoiler alert. Okay, this is a book club, so there are spoilers. But yeah, in the end of the book, they find out, or like 3/4 ways through the climax, they find out that David's actually Katchu's, like, mob owner, I guess, ex-lover / mob owner brother, who's been sent to spy on her, and the whole time he's been, like, trying to, like, turn her straight, essentially, and, like, make her love him, which is, like, bad. It's not cool. Okay, it's not cool.
Yeah.
And crap, where was I getting at? Oh yeah, David's a dick. And he shouldn't be all like, well, you're either this or that. Because yeah, that's not cool. But I think the book as itself highlights, like, it doesn't. I don't think the book itself is saying that. I think that's what that character is saying, because I think there's many other instances in the book and in the ones that come after where it talks about sort of different types of sexualities and different views on it and people living happily with it. The only thing I didn't really like is when they started talking about Kachu's past, and David's like, well, that's why you're messed up. And it's like...
Yeah. No. No. I actually, well, that's an interesting perspective, and maybe that's the one we should consider, is that the author really gives that kind of, you're either this or you're that point of view to mostly the men. The male characters really are that, because Francine's ex, what's his name? Frankie?
Freddie.
It's Freddie, yeah. Is also like, well, you know, you're living with your crazy lesbian. I knew she would turn you, and that's why you wouldn't put out for me, because you're in love with her. And I mean, he's just a freaking piece of work, my God. And it's these guys who go like, no, and then, no, I have to have you. You have to be with me because I love you. And it's like, oh God, no, just no. The almost Shakespearean timing of it too. My favorite moment in the book has to be when Francine snaps and just starts screaming about how she hates men, and she thinks all men deserve to die, and then she and Kachu almost kiss.
Yeah!
And the doorbell rings, and it's David, and I was like, no! Flip the table. That moment was, I thought, just like, and genuine and authentic. Definitely my favorite spot in the story.
Yeah, there's a bunch of good ones, and I also really like the moment where the detectives are investigating that PI's murder, and they're like, oh man, this person was killed, like the contusions are by hand and like with such force, and they're calculating the amount of force and the height, and they're like, then Tambi comes in dressed as a nurse, and she's like, oh, I need to check on him, and then they leave, and it's like, yo, Tambi was the one that beat him up in the first place, but these guys are too busy thinking about, oh, it needs to be someone really big and use a lot of force, that they totally discount like a woman entering it. So that was like also one of my favorite moments in the book.
Yeah, the prose sections are really unique and interesting. Like, I'm always all about seeing what different graphic novel authors use to try and, you know, mix up the formula, and those moments of prose in the story are really cool. And the slow realization of that scene where he's like, wait, all, and has big hands, shit, get back to the room, and then it's too late. And that was just really cool.
Some of the prose I will like there's some, like, generally I'm a fan of, like, if it's a comic, just like the comic. But in this case, like, the prose I found was good. I didn't necessarily like the songs and the poetry, especially the ones that have, like, wildly different fonts, just because it was harder to read and sort of, like, I don't know. There's a lot of subtext, and sometimes I just wish people would give it to me straight. Just tell me what's going on. I just don't like poetry all that much. I guess it's just too much subtext for me.
Poetry I can handle, but I definitely agree with making fonts weird. I know another series for that is Sophie Campbell's Wet Moon series. Has a lot of diary entries and live journal entries, and the live journal, it's fine, it's small, but it's still typeface. The diary entries are these scrawling, curvy, cursive things, and oftentimes when I'm rereading a book, I will just skip those straight up. Like,
yeah,
it's like rereading Watchmen and skipping all the bits between the chapters.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I found the prose in Strangers in Paradise, like, it wasn't too much that I was like, whatever. And it was informative to the characters, but it was also like a different setting. Like, it was different. Like, it was about this, like, detective. So I found, like, because it had that story attached to it, it worked really well in this book.
Mm-hmm. Or the conversation between the two guys about Francine, and the two different images of Francine you get from that, which are two different images entirely. Oh, sorry, here's the train. From the Francine you're experiencing in the book. which I think is cool. The author really shows how the male perspective or the male gaze on a female
Oh my god, that
can
viral.
be both at the train and just the male gaze in general can be really, again, fitting someone into a box. The one guy is like, oh, she just wouldn't stop, you know, teasing me sexually, and she was insatiable, and I couldn't get enough, but then it was too much for me. And then the other guy is like, well, she wouldn't do anything for me. And then you have Francine herself as a character in the book, and she's like a human being. She's a hot mess and a compulsive eater, and she loves her friends, and she doesn't really know what she's doing. I appreciated that you've got these three different versions of a character.
Yeah, that scene was really great. It also gives us some insight into where Francine's coming from, because originally Francine didn't want to sleep with Freddie because she really liked him. Why? I don't know. She really liked him, and it seems like all the guys she sleeps with leave her, which is, like, dumb. But, like, you know, that's how she felt. So it gave us sort of that backstory as to, like, you know, she's coming from a sense of, like, in her other relationship, she was very sexually active and promiscuous, and, like, would institute, she would start sexual interactions, right?
Instigate.
Instigate. Yeah. That's the word I was looking for. So I think that was, like, really helpful to give us some insight into her character and why she's got these particular hang-ups about sensuality. What I love about this book overall is, like, there are so many ladies in this book, and they are the stars of this book. Like, nobody cares about David. Like, when I first started reading this book, I'm like, who's this guy? Like, I'd completely forgotten about him. Because it was, like, 10 years ago, and I was like, I just know Francine and Kachu. And later on, like, I really liked how they revealed the sort of mob story behind that and the occurring and stuff, because, like, you know, you could tell that she was hiding something and she was running from something, but I really like that it's, like, a really boss, like, female adversary, and she's, like, running this mob.
Female henchwomen.
She's like, got female henchwomen and, like, a female, like, manager that runs all of her businesses, and so yeah, I really liked that, and that's, like, the best part. That's pretty much it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely will be reading the rest of them. I wish we had them at the Labyrinth. Unfortunately, we only have volume 5, so I guess I'm gonna have to get the first 4 from the library.
I mean, you work there. You could just be like, hey, can we restock this stuff? Maybe.
I could. It's definitely old. I'd also love to see, I don't know if there's a newer printing or I think there's a bigger omnibus collection or something.
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't think, like, because when I was looking for this one, there aren't many available, so there might be new releases. The author, Terry Moore, is really good. I've also read his other stuff. And it's also
what else? Really what else has he done?
There's this one called Echo. I have a big. It's over there. I have a big book of it, all the collected ones, and more recently this one called Rachel Rising. And this
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, this girl, like, comes back from the dead, and she's like, what? Echo is she goes out to take photography and then gets, like, rained on by this metallic thing, and then it, like, forms a suit on her body, and she's like, it's pretty cool. I recommend them both. I mean, they're both very, it's the same style of storytelling, but with different, like, stories.
Cool. So I didn't do a lot of research into Terry Moore. I mean, he writes some pretty strong female voices, but is he himself gay, or is he just, like, got a really good understanding of queer voice? Do we know?
I didn't do much research, but I don't know. I mean, I think maybe, but it could just be that he's, like, a really good listener and a really good storyteller. Because like a lot of these themes and a lot of like the way they talk and stuff, if you're like, there's really good creators that will sit on the subway and overhear conversations and write certain dialogue down so they can sort of get authentic dialogue and try to like really understand who they're writing and who they're writing for. So that could be the case, but I don't know. I just know his work is awesome. And I'm just like,
yeah, I'll definitely be picking up more stuff from this, and I would definitely recommend this to anyone who wants like a good, strong slice of life, weird story.
Yeah, it's. I mean, like, there's a lot of like ups and downs, and like in terms of like emotions and like really tense moments. But I think overall, it's a lot of fun. Just be like, you know, these two women just like living together and like teasing each other and being silly and like being at home with themselves and with each other allows for these like really interesting interactions where I really like the note that Kachu leaves for like Francine. She's like, oh, I went out, don't eat the chocolate cake. After you eat the chocolate cake, here's what you should do. Okay. So yeah. Do you have any like cons, anything that we discussed that you wanted to like? We talked mostly about the good stuff. Was there lots of fun?
Yeah, well, I would say like the only thing I got that vibe a couple times of like, oh, they can't be bi, they can only be gay or straight, just like generally, but I think we discussed that it's mostly a character perspective and not an author perspective, which I appreciate. And yeah, I would say the cursive-y stuff, especially the poetry near the end, is a little bit tough to read just because like I don't know what choice that font is, but it is really, see if I can hold it up to the like, there's just lines through it, and yeah, I was not a fan of those bits.
Yeah, and there's the poetry with the curvy eyes. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about, but that was a little difficult to read too.
But overall, like storytelling, art-wise, I really liked it. I liked that there were a lot of different body types as well.
Yeah.
And men, honestly. Like, the character designs were very varied and distinct.
I liked how when we saw Freddy later in the book, like his hairline had receded a little bit more. I'm like, yeah. The only thing that kind of sucks in this book is the men are really crunchy. They're like ladies. Because there's Freddy, who's just like flat out an asshole. There's, what's his name? David, who's like a closeted asshole. The only guy I thought was interesting and cool was like Chuck, who was like very honest. And I'm like, that's cool. That's at least something different. And he was the ex that was telling Freddy about how amazing Francine was in bed. I really like how
I also liked the detective.
Ended. Oh yeah, the detective was cool too. I liked him being bossed around by Miss Parker.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the way the scene with Chuck and Freddy ended, and Freddy's all like, well, why, if you liked her so much, why did you end it? And he's like, I didn't. She dumped me when she met you. And it's like, I like that.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. No, but I think the strong message that comes out of this is in the context of relationships between men and women, there's an underlying like obsession with men to put like, this is what you are, and if I'm in love with you, you have to be with me kind of voice. Like, that was the theme that I got strongly throughout the book, and I was like, no, women are not objects. And that's the contesting kind of argument coming through.
Yeah, the book does a really good job of that, and presenting sort of both sides and people being like really firm on them. So I think it's really good. You should definitely check out the rest of the series. Do you want to talk about Fun Home? Right?
Yeah,
Anything
let's
else?
talk about Fun Home. No.
Okay. I'm gonna
So for
start.
context, I can't find my copy of Fun Home, but I have definitely read it a couple of times. It's just hiding in my apartment somewhere.
I wasn't gonna be like, "Where's your proof?" But yeah, so I'm gonna start. I didn't like this book, and I think there's a difference between like I didn't enjoy it, but that doesn't mean I don't think it's well done. I didn't enjoy it because it wasn't very it wasn't particularly pleasant. I wasn't entertained, but I understand why this book is important, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the chapter list, she talks, it seems like they're all about different things, right? I think, is that backwards for you guys? Or backwards?
No, that's for
old father. First one's about father. Second one's about a happy death. That old catastrophe. The shadow of young girls in flower. Like, they just seem like different things, but it's all about her dad, and her relationship with him, and all this sort of like weird family, like skeletons in closet type thing, and a lot of it was just like really sad, and it just was like, man, I'm really glad I don't have like these kinds of issues with my family. Which, I mean, it's like, it's not really what I wanted to take away from this book, but it was, yeah. I don't know if I'm rambling. Why don't you go?
I think that's definitely a book you read for fun. It makes you think. Interestingly, I didn't read Fun Home until after I read Bechdel's other memoir, Are You My Mother, which hard and like left me a weird existential sobbing mess for half a day. So I think I was prepared coming into Fun Home that it was not going to be like a nice ride. And it's definitely a difficult book to get through if you have a difficult relationship or have had a difficult relationship with your parents at any point in your life. But I absolutely adore the art style and the color palette and everything. And I think what comes out and the way she tells the story is really interesting. The flashbacks and forwards and how everything kind of starts to parallel and weave itself together really worked for me.
Yeah, it is really well done in that way because, you know, it starts off with sort of a tame, like the first chapter is sort of like more of a tame description of her family and her father, and it's like, it's talking about like crummy situations and short tempers and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, okay, it's a dysfunctional family, and then like it ends with like, and then he killed himself, and you're like, what? Okay. And then it just gets crazier from there, and it does do a lot of back and forth, but I feel like it's at the right times, because it's a story that can't really be told chronologically because it all waiting for your train. Okay, it all culminates when, you know, when she's in college, and she comes out to her parents through a letter because it's really hard for them to talk to them on the phone. I'm like, all right. And then her mother's like, is it because your father has had all these affairs with Ben? And she's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So it isn't a story that could be told chronologically because like she didn't know all of this stuff was going on until like after.
Yeah. Yeah, it's those like hindsight gives you this perspective that you didn't have as a child moments that I really find refreshing, because we can all look back on our childhood knowing everything we know now and conversations that adults were having around us and go, my God, that's what they were talking about, you know? And it's really strange and surreal. And I think Fun Home is one of the best memoirs I've read that captures that kind of feeling.
Yeah. I also really like they touch up on a little bit in the book about sort of this sort of selective memory thing, because there's conversations that adults are having that they don't think the kids are paying attention to and hearing. And then there's other conversations and there's other stuff where like her mom's like, well, didn't you see what was going on? And, you know, Allison's like, no, I wasn't paying attention. Right? So everyone, what is important to everybody at that time and what they remember later is totally different for every person. So I think he does a good job of explaining that too. I really liked the funeral home bits where they talked about how they owned a funeral home and how they would stay there, and it's sort of like interesting comfortableness with death because they grew up around it. So like that was different, but it was also interesting. And the other thing I really liked is when she starts talking about her diaries. I'm trying to find the page. Where she talks about her diaries and her journals and how she started, you know, she began to second guess herself. And so instead of writing these declarative statements of, I went to the park, we saw a red seesaw, or like we saw a red truck, and we played, it was fun. And so she starts adding in like, we went to the park, I think we saw a red seesaw, teeter-totter, whatever, like, and starts adding all of these like quantifiers of like, I think or I feel, and so and ends up just sort of short forming it into this symbol of like, I'm not really, and it sort of just means like, I'm not really sure what's real and what's not, but this is what I think is happening. And there's whole journal entries just covered up with this uncertainty. And that really resonated with me. Is like, it's like, yeah, uncertainty is like a fact of life. But with her with her character in the book and the story you're trying to tell, it makes a lot of sense because she's like, even as a kid, like she doesn't want to do girly stuff, and even as a kid, like even as a teenager, she's not interested, and like that whole I think comes sort of into play later, where it's like, well, maybe you don't really know yourself all that well, right? So like, I really liked those journal entry bits.
Yeah, I think it's played up a little bit more in Are You My Mother as well, but I do really appreciate how honest she is about Colt's, her childhood was, not just because of the context of her parents, but because of her own mental health struggles and the neuroses and stuff she went through, and how that plays into how it affects her self-awareness and her awareness of what's going on with her father.
Yeah, hold on, I just found that passage. Yeah, and then like this is also around the time where she develops like OCD. And so, so she just like sort of changes everything to like add this symbol. So that was really interesting, and it just touched up on this. So I guess in Are You Mother, it sort of builds over that more.
Yeah, because I think it's her mom she's dictating the journal entries too, right? And Are You My Mother is more about the relationship between her and her mother. It's really good. I definitely would recommend anyone who's read Fun Home. I know a lot of people picked it up after it got, made into a musical, which I would love to see. I hope it comes to Toronto sometime soon, because I heard it was well done.
Is it still running?
On Broadway, I think so.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think this book is really important, but like it was just really sad. It was just so sad.
Yeah.
It just made me really sad. And like, yeah. I think it is really interesting to sort of explore how her experience coming out and living as like a gay person is totally different than her father's experience, where he had experiences with boys, but he never thought about himself as gay. He never thought about it as like as who he is. He thought of it more as like a lifestyle choice that wasn't available to him. It was never an option. So it was just like, even though like they lived in Europe, they visited New York, he would go off and have affairs, and it's just like, why would you live your lives like that? But society sucks, man.
Yeah, I think definitely. I didn't come upon this criticism myself, but when it was pointed out to me, it gave me pause and let me reflect a little bit on how sometimes when a memoir is written to make a point, as I feel like this one is, or if you haven't read My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, it's a fabulous manga memoir that just came out and is really, really powerful. But they're very depressing, and they really do focus on the negative elements of the characters' lives. And you, as you're reading that, kind of go, this is very sad. I can't believe you've gone through that. I can really connect to all the sad bits. And then you go, but you didn't have any moments of happiness, you know? There weren't any things, silver linings, moments, because we can reflect on all the dark parts of our lives, but, you know, without, you know, the brighter parts, we wouldn't be able to differentiate. And so I think sometimes these memoirs that are all struggle do kind of bog us down, and we go, yeah, those are really sad. And they're worth reading because they make you think, but it also makes me question their genuineness. Like, were things really that awful 100% of the time? You're telling me you never had, you know, a good day or a moment of connection?
In this book, it seems like they, like, there's a scene where they talk about how, like, where she talks about how if this was like a dorm in the city and it was just a bunch of housemates living in a creative commune, it would have been amazing because everyone was off doing their own things, pursuing their own artistic interests. But as a family, it's very disconnected and disjointed. So, like, I got the feeling that there's like a lot of days in between where it didn't seem like there were moments of happiness, but it just seemed contentment of like everyone's just sort of doing their thing and everything's okay. But there aren't a lot of those silver linings other than like when I got to college, I was able to connect with my father over literature, and it's like I feel like you must have had a connection like before then. But yeah, I mean, maybe maybe it was that complicated and that hard, but it is odd. But yeah, from what we see in the book, it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of that. And yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to talk about. I mean, there's this other thing of like his father like seducing his students, like hiring them and then seducing them, and I'm like, whoa. That's like wrong in more than the gay way. It's like, like, no, not, sorry. It's wrong, and not because society perceives gayness as wrong. I didn't mean anything by that. Please don't hate me. Oh my gosh. But it was wrong in the sense of like the teacher taking advantage of a student because of that power relationship, and also the fact of like an adult taking advantage of technically a juvenile, like a child. Like that's pedophilia. Like it is what it is, right? So, so yeah, it talks. In the book, she talks about it in the sense of like, oh, my father took lovers, and it's like, I feel like there's more. It's not just about the fact that he took lovers that were men. I feel like there's more going on here, because like there was a lot of societally wrong things in that scenario, and giving beer to minors is the only thing he got charged for, but oh jeez.
Yeah, there's the one bit I was super uncomfortable about, is when he has the one guy who sticks around for a really long time, who does like yard work around the house and looks after the kids, and you're like,
and babysitter.
Yeah, babysitter. And the mom is just there. And again, as I say, this is kind of touched on a little bit more in Are You My Mother, where Bechtel kind of ponders the effect all of this must have had on her mother. But it's just, the level of awkward uncomfortableness that I feel when I'm like, how must it feel to reflect back and go, oh yes, that babysitter I really liked who was always doing yard work around the house and whatever, he was sleeping with my father. It's disconcerting.
It is titled A Family Tragicomic.
Yeah, and it is that, for sure.
So yeah, like, I didn't enjoy it. I think it was well done though, and I think it's important. If I got tickets to see the stage play, I would love to see it. And going in understanding more of like how like emotionally heartbreaking it is, it would have been easier. But yeah, I was like reading this, and then I had to stop. I was like, I have to finish this later. I just feel so crummy right now. Like, cause I don't know, I'm a little emotional, and whenever like I always like try to bond with characters and books and stuff, because I'd rather focus on their fictional struggles than my life ones. So this one got me really sad. So I had to take my time with it.
Yeah, I think I really appreciated it for the story and for the fact that it is recommended as one of the best like queer graphic novels and memoir graphic novels out there. Certainly that's how it was lauded in my graphic novel class at U of T. But again, I was also coming into it having come off of Are You My Mother? And I think, and I don't want to always talk about that because we are talking about Fun Home here, but in terms of emotional connection, as someone who has had difficult moments, you know, and relationships more with my mom than my dad, I find that book is more connecting emotionally because, again, Bechdel really explores the difficulties of the relationship with her mom, who is still alive at the time she's writing the book, versus this feels more like a reflection on her childhood and the tragedy of her father's suicide.
I'm just trying to find a page. There was a really pretty moment where she's reflecting on her father in a distant positive way. And I'm trying to find it, but I can't. Oh, here it was. I really liked this page. This is a library copy, so somebody wrote all over the book. But she talks about how my father once nearly came to blows with a female dinner guest about whether a particular patch of embroidery was fuchsia or magenta. But the infinite gradations of color in a fine sunset, from salmon to canary to midnight blue, left him wordless. So, like, I really liked, like, this seemed like the one sort of positive scene of, like, them just enjoying a sunset together.
Yeah.
So, I was just like, there's not a lot of, like, triumph in this book. There's not a lot of, like, positivity. So I just wanted to harken back to what you said about, like, it, you know, all these memoirs speak about negative stuff. It's just like that moment felt like contentment. It didn't feel like joy or happiness, but contentment. Could you guys see that at all? Because I had Tara up here. Sorry, I didn't show that well because I was on your screen and not my screen. But hopefully the audience can see this. Okay.
I mean, I'll just go on. I love Bechdel's art style. I definitely would recommend anyone who likes classic comic strips but really wants to examine like an early queer voice in comics should check out Dykes to Watch Out For, Bechdel's comic that she talks about writing and becoming successful with in Fun Home. It is hilarious, and it speaks a lot about the politics of different perspectives across the queer scale, like different lesbian perspectives, and there's romances, and there's, you know, early trans voices, and it's definitely worth reading as well. Little Pride Month recommendation there.
Yeah, no, I wanna read that too, because that one seems like it's not all really sad.
No, it can be quite humorous, but also quite reflective.
I like a little bit of everything. This was like wholly a little too sad for me, but I don't mind a bit of sadness or self-reflection or melancholy. It's just like I want to be brought up afterwards. You know what I mean? But
you want some hope. Yeah.
I do. So yeah, like this one was. I have to agree. Like I really like the art style. It is very classic cartoonist art style, but it is also very stylized in terms of like, you know, like the facial expressions and the way that she does hair and stuff make it different. And I also like she's got some stuff where she draws photos, and so she does that in a different style. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a lot of fun. The characters, you know, they are animated. They make lots of faces, and you can tell different emotions. And the panel layout is really well done. It changes up to put emphasis on certain things, and if it's important, it gets bigger space. So in terms of that, it's really well done. And then the other thing is, like, I was also curious about her diary entries because she uses a different font style for it. So I wondered if she like went back and found it and recreated it. And I think she did that for a number of things, because there were times where she's doing, where she's showing us letters between her mother and her father, and some of it is handwritten and it's like chicken scratch. There's some of it that's typed, and it looks like typed, but it also looks like she illustrated it as typed. I don't know if you know more about her process, but I thought that was really interesting.
It strikes me as she is one of those artists who uses photo reference for sure, especially on stuff like that. Yeah, the writing.
So there's like writing on this page, and there's also like a dictionary definition on that one. So
and just the accuracy of clothing, and I mean the architecture of the funeral home itself is such an important character. I feel like there were a lot of photo references used for that, and you get that in a lot of graphic novel memoirs will include at the end like some photographs where they kind of demonstrate where they drew their inspiration and whether they were just drawing the characters wearing a particular outfit from a photograph or whether they were actually emulating the photographs themselves. You see that a lot, and I think it lends a really good flavor to the graphic novels. It makes them feel like they are placed in the times that they are discussing.
Yeah.
That research.
I do, because like the best things that go into planning and archetyping a book are things that if they're done well, if it's executed well, you don't notice it, right? It just feels normal and natural. So the way they set up the house and the way they show it in different scenarios, and there's also a part where the trees get knocked down in a storm. And it just like it shows how the house has gone from like being in shade to like not. So it's done really well. It's one of the things I didn't really think about until you said it. Now I'm like looking back and I'm like, yeah, these angles are really straight and consistent between different shots.
I did like, I will say, how the house feels, or how it seems like Bechdel feels like the house was the model child of the family. It was the one that the father could most have an influence on, and therefore, like, I think you get a sense that at times in her childhood she felt inferior to the house because she couldn't be the child, the daughter her dad wanted her to be.
Right, he could continually renovate the house and restore its original beauty.
He could make the house look and present itself as the way he wanted it to look and present itself, but he could never do that with his tomboy, queer, lesbian daughter, you know, who just wanted to have short hair and wear shorts. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that is definitely the strongest symbolism and theme throughout the story. That I mean, I also just think the house is beautiful, and I'm like, man, I would be proud of that house too if I fixed it up like that. But you get a sense that it's more than just pride. It's like it's his reason. It becomes his reason for living, or that's the sense that she got.
Yeah, especially because it wasn't until after he started working on another house that he ended his life. Because it was just like, yeah. There is a lot in this book, and I don't think I'm gonna get it all in one reading. I hope I can get to a place where like I don't take it personal and I can come back and read it again and explore more of these themes. I'm sure people who watch this in the future are gonna be like, oh my god, they're only just scratching the surface of this book. But I mean, that's also a good thing that there is more to this book, and we'll have to sit through it on multiple readings and detach ourselves. I definitely, yeah, I can understand why this is so important to like queer comics. So I'm really glad that I read it, because I've been hearing about it for years, and it was only like now in this book club where I'm like, okay, I'll read it. I'll make time for it.
Yeah, and definitely, like, I would recommend checking out the soundtrack to the musical on YouTube, because even if you don't know the play, it's actually fascinating listening to some of the songs and reflecting how they've interpreted the graphic novel into song. Like, without the visuals of the actual play, or how they went, this is what the father is going to sing about. And they have different versions of Bechtel, like, I think 4 different actors play the different age ranges of her, and they sing different songs. And as I say, I haven't actually seen the play, but I've listened to these, and I think they pair really interestingly with the graphic novel itself. Like, you could read it and listen to the songs and get something completely different out of the book.
Yeah, no, and I also, I like that this is like a musical that was developed in her lifetime. Because often, you know, like, they'll develop a musical afterwards and it doesn't really have too much of a connection, where it really feels like the development of the musical, like, she was really involved in it, and they asked her for input and stuff. I haven't seen it, but I didn't recently.
Just pretend I'm living in New York and this is the subway. It's very, very hip.
We're straight out of one of those,
definitely
like,
not the GO train
action movies.
Yeah, basically.
You got like a chic apartment underneath an overpass.
Yeah, that's me for sure, 100%.
Okay, so I think that's all. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss? I mean, I'm sure we're missing stuff, but
I think we picked, or the book club, I am not on Facebook, so I was not in the poll, but there are so many upcoming and continuing, like, it's really interesting to see how queer voices are developing in comics this day. I think particularly the indie scene and Kickstarter has really helped that, and there are so many books you could pick. I appreciate that there were 2 classics chosen for the book club, but I definitely think people should get out there and keep reading, you know, anything coming out of Iron Circus Comics. There's so many web comics out there, you know, and even people are starting to get the edges of the big 2 a little bit there, moving in. And so it's kind of cool to discuss some classics when we're living in a day and age when queer voices are really
there are
heard.
queer comic classics. You know, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, these are the classics. They're what, like 10 years old, and that's kind of sad. But it's also cool to be living through the development of a genre.
Yeah, no, and it's constantly evolving. I am gonna just read off a couple more of those suggestions because you weren't on Facebook, but I also think maybe some of these other viewers are like, yeah, I like these books, I want to check out, or like I didn't like these books, I want to check out more queer comics. So some of the other recommendations: Kim and Kim, Volume 1, Essential Dykes to Watch Out For, which is the other Bechtel one. My Brother's Husband by Kingaro Tagame. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Less Than Epic Adventures of TJ and Amal. Stuck Rubber Baby. Oh, I haven't read that one yet. I heard it's good. Transformers, More Than Meets the Eye, Volume 1. They transform in more ways than one. Okay, I'm sorry, I had to. I haven't actually read the book, but I imagine them transforming genders, and it makes me really excited. If that's not what happens in the book, you and I will both be disappointed.
I mean, I've heard that there are definitely some queer moments in the new Transformers comics, so now that one's actually been recommended, because I thought it was just subtext in, like fan fiction and stuff, but now I might have to go check out that Transformers verse.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't read it, so I don't know if that's actually what it's about, but it was recommended because of I think they're doing more than just subtext. I think there's at least a character or two that is openly out. So, yeah, and if you read these books and you're joining the discussion and the book club's been out for a while, feel free to continue to put your comments in, and we'll check up on them later. I've decided we're gonna suspend the book club for the rest of the summer, just because it's been hard to get people together. It's really nice outside. Everyone wants to be drinking in a pub talking about books and not like at home on YouTube. So yeah, I want to continue doing sort of more of these like thematic book clubs where we sort of pick a theme for the month, and then do a poll based on that. I am going to be publishing a survey where I want to really get feedback from you guys about how you want to participate in the book club, what days and times works in terms of meeting, and how you want to participate. I know you don't use Facebook, so I'm going to try to up my my mail. What's it called? My subscription list, mailing list game. Learn MailChimp and use it better. So that's going to be up on Facebook page. I'll try to tweet it out as well when I have the survey.
You know what? I'll be getting back on Facebook eventually, I'm sure.
It's not the only tool that's out there. It's just the most convenient.
Ain't that the truth?
Yep. So I'm Alice. You're watching my show. I also run Comic Shop Ladies Night. We got one coming up July 22nd at The Beguiling. Y'all are invited. The ladies, the people that identify as ladies. It's gonna be rad. I'm inviting you too. I don't know if I invited you before, but you're invited.
Okay. Yay! Awesome.
I'll send you the details.
I have not been to the new Beguiling, so I'm looking forward to checking that out.
It's gonna be rad. We're gonna be there. You can meet us. Boom!
Woo!
Okay, thanks for joining us. We'll see you in September.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Bye.
Sorry.
Oh.
Did you want to plug anything?
You could follow me on Twitter at Tara McTavish, MACTAVISH. I tweet about comics a lot because I also work downtown Toronto at the Labyrinth Bookstore. It's in the annex. Feel free to come in anytime and talk to me about comics there. Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
Cool. We'll see you. We'll be reading comics.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.